Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 26th of April 2021. In this video, we'll be discussing this couple of issues. A case for judicial federalism. What do you understand by federalism? Basically, it means division of power between the center and states. However, as per the design of the constitution, we have a unified judiciary. But does that mean in a crisis like COVID, where different geographies have different sort of problems, is it justified to have a uniform judicial order across the country? That is to say, for example, if a court in Madras High Court, for example, gives an order with respect to a problem in Tamil Nadu, is that order applicable to Delhi as well? Might not be. The reason is different situations are prevailing in different cities across different times. Therefore, considering the extraordinary times that we are in, it is important to understand that we have to decentralize judicial decisions as well. How do we do that? What is the reason? Let us discuss in this article. So, this article is basically trying to discuss the idea of judicial federalism and the autonomy of high courts. The broader issue that we are discussing here is issue of transfer of cases from high courts to Supreme Court. The first point that we have to know is, according to Article 139A, Supreme Court indeed has a power to transfer the cases from High Court to itself. This is as per Article 139A. Please remember, this is a constitutional provision. Also, if you take a look at the previous Supreme Court judgments, we have to know an important judgment called Parmanand Katara versus Union of India case. As per the judgment in this 1989 case, Supreme Court said that right to emergency medical treatment is a part of the citizen's fundamental right. One might have a doubt in their mind whether right to health is actually a fundamental right as per this judgment. Please remember that right to health is not a fundamental right. We are only talking about emergency treatment. So COVID-19 situation is indeed an emergency. Therefore, according to the logic that was laid down in the jurisprudence of this case, we can say that Parmanand Katara case can be used as a base to argue that every citizen right now requires a emergency treatment as a matter of right rather than a charity. Since judiciary should protect the rights, that is the mandate of judiciary. Rightly so, Delhi High Court, Madras High Court, and the High Court of Telangana have passed a lot of orders. But the surprising fact is that Supreme Court asked these courts as to why uniform orders cannot be passed by Supreme Court in the case of health emergency, and this indicates the possibility of the transfer of cases, as we already discussed, by using the Article 139A power. So basically, SC is trying to transfer the cases from High Court to itself. This article is debating whether such an approach is a good one or not. What is the first issue? If you take a look at the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, basically health is a state subject. This definition of public health and hospitals is also a part of this component of health. There could be related subjects coming under the union list or concurrent list, but there may be areas of interstate conflicts also. What do you mean by this? For example, there have been allegations that people from Maharashtra, not being able to get the right kind of treatment there, have migrated into parts of Telangana, which was responsible for the increase in the number of cases. This can be or cannot be true, but it's definitely a source of conflict between these two states. How do we deal with such scenarios? Right now, what high courts are doing is they are dealing with specific challenges at regional level and maintaining that judicial sanctity in their own jurisdiction. In addition to the geographical reasons, the constitutional scheme of the Indian judiciary is to be understood. For this purpose, we have to know a case called L. Chandrakumar versus Union of India case in 1997. In this case, Supreme Court itself said that High Court's autonomy cannot be undermined in any situation. Even if we take a look at the constitutional scheme, the ambit of Article 226, which gives High Courts the power, is much larger than Article 32. In all these arguments, we have to remember that judicial autonomy is very important, and that is the meaning of judicial federalism that we're talking about, despite having a unified judiciary. In this context, you have to compare the scheme of things in US, where actually the principle of federalism is respected, and in India, where there is a uniform judiciary. The reason why the structure of US judiciary is different from Indian judiciary is because USA is basically a federation. In India, it is called a union of states, not a federation of states. In order to have easy transactions between various judicial bodies, and the law is more or less similar. Since in India we have jurisdictions clearly defined, and the principle of autonomy has been respected till now, the principle of judicial unity has actually worked well. The moment this autonomy is being undermined, there is definitely a case to argue about this judicial federalism, and the best example for this is USA. So how are the things working in USA? The central court or the Supreme Court in USA will only deal with federal matters, or if you have to take a parallel in the Indian situation, Supreme Court should deal with only union subjects, not state subjects. But since this is not the way our constitution makers designed our constitution, it should be respected. The autonomy should be safeguarded by Supreme Court, and any orders which seek to uniformly apply all kinds of judicial principles across the country as decided by Supreme Court is not welcome. That is what this author is trying to say. That is the gist of this article. The second article, titled A Green Partnership, is about the recently convened Leaders Summit on Climate Change. So, US President Joe Biden has actually convened this a few days ago. What happened was nearly 40 world leaders, including our Prime Minister, were invited to the event to understand the importance of climate action. So, this summit, where these 40 leaders convened, is seen as a key milestone on the COP26, which is going to happen in Scotland this year in November. The world has to convene and decide on the agenda what will happen in the post pandemic world. So, this has been the agenda, and on this occasion, India and US has actually signed a Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership. So, this Clean Energy Agenda 2030 is actually a joint climate and clean energy initiative of India and USA. What it will do is it will try to demonstrate how the world can align the climate action with the economic development. This has been the challenge, economy versus environment, because the kind of economic development that we are witnessing right now is heavily reliant on carbon emissions. So any activity that is taken up to protect our environment is actually hampering economic development because of the present kind of model we are in. So the two main tracks of the initiative is, one, to ensure that clean energy is a priority for both the countries, and at the same time we are trying to mobilize resources to handle the problems associated with climate change. So what was the commitment from US? US said that it will cut the US greenhouse gas emissions by half. So 50% reduction by 2030 is the commitment given by US. Also, with respect to financing, it said that it will make 2 times the public climate financing for developing countries, and 3 times the public financing for climate adaptation. Also, when we're talking about the NDC, the concept of NDC first started in 2015 at the Paris Climate Deal. What is the update on this? US submitted that a new NDC or nationally determined contribution target that aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions will be 50 to 52% from 2005 levels. So India is applauded at this meeting for stepping up its climate change commitment, including the partnership with US. So what it amended was the 450 gigawatt renewable energy power plan, which was deployed to meet the ambitious 2030 target for climate action and clean energy. We know that India upgraded its commitment to generate 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022. We are well on our path to achieve this objective, so we have upgraded it to 450 gigawatt by 2030. Such a commitment is very welcome because in the time of the previous president Donald Trump, uh, the climate action agenda has taken a backseat, mainly because he was focused more on economy in a business as usual approach. If US is not actually participating in any of the climate change talks, it would do a lot of damage. The main reason is USA is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitter. If US can actually make a transition towards post carbon economy or come up with a technological model for economic development where fossil fuels are not burnt, then we can say that uh, again USA will have a chance to become a world leader. Right now, from 1990 to 2000s, USA was a leader in terms of the domination it exhibited in various geopolitical avenues, whether it is the Gulf region or whether it is the Asian region. It was very successful, but the rise of China has been challenging it. So the major transition towards this post-carbon economy, which is much the demand of the world right now, if USA can invest in technologies, and if India can partner along with US in this model of development, we would be achieving a lot because we have a huge market and we will also be in a position to contain China. So this is the larger agenda when we're talking about international politics and geopolitics. But the major goal is to contain climate change. That is the gist of this article.